What's up, everybody, and welcome to The Horror Within Me, a podcast dedicated to the world of horror. I am your host, Eric, and each week I'm going to rate and review a new movie or TV show that falls within the horror genre. Now, this is a show for horror fans, hosted by a horror fan, who's just here to share my opinions and experiences with my fellow horror friends in hopes that you may gain something new to watch or not watch, and really just talk about all things related to this beautifully dark and spooky world that we call horror. So if this sounds like a show for you, stick around, we're going to have a lot of fun. So let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new Spooky Sunday episode of The Horror Within Me. I am your host, Eric, and this is a podcast where we do movie reviews and other things sometimes. Welcome. Super excited. If you can't tell, I'm in a little bit of a silly mood, which is always good for the episode, as opposed to me being not that great of a mood and then just kind of forcing through it. So I'm going to start off this week by apologizing that there was no brand new episode last week. So if you were looking for it and you thought that there was something going on and that you missed it, I just want to confirm there was not a new episode last week. Time got away from me and I had a lot of things going on and I was just unable to record it. Because for those of you who are longtime fans that listen to the show, know that I have a full-time job, a part-time job, and many, many, many things going on in my life that I have to record by the week. So this is very fresh, close to the air date. So with that being said, again, there was no episode made last week. But just wanted to talk about the episode 50 Terrifier 2 review episode that was done a couple weeks ago. If you listen to it, and I just wanted to let you know that I was brought to my attention. I kind of didn't notice this, but the audio quality was off. So apparently my voice was much lower, and so the people were turning it up. Jenny had pointed out, and then when the music that was added came on, it was very loud and bothersome. So I actually went back in and rebalanced all the audio so that it matched and republished that episode. So if you were trying to listen to it and it was bothering you and you couldn't get into it because of the audio issues, give it another shot. I believe I fixed the issue. So go back and listen to episode 50 because I think it was a really good episode and it was a fun time. But I'm very excited about this week's episode. This week's episode is titled Cult Classic: The Return of the Living Dead. And I've been kicking myself all month of July because I didn't even think, until after I already brought the show back for season 2 with Evil Dead Rise, that I should have brought the show back with the Return of the Living Dead. The title is catchy, but not only that, season 2 episode, the first episode of season 2 aired July 2nd. The events of the Return of the Living Dead happened on July 3rd. So it would have just made so much more sense in so many different ways if I would have done the Return of the Living Dead as the first episode. But I've got it in at the bare nick of time to get it on in July still and pay homage to this cult classic movie. I'm very excited about it. So strange about this movie is during one of my Blu-ray hunts, when I go to one of my places I do frequent a lot is the local FYE in my mall. They always have like really good Blu-ray sales, and I actually found the Return of the Living Dead there on Blu-ray for like $7, and so I bought it and planned a like 80s horror comedy movie night with my husband and Jenny, and we watched it, and it was like a couple weeks before the event, so it was like mid-June. Just such a weird coincidence. It was not planned that way at all. I honestly hadn't seen the Return of the Living Dead since I was a really small child, so I didn't remember, and I knew that I liked it, so that's why I bought it, and I wanted to watch it again. But when I posted about it on TikTok and everything, people were like, "Oh, I watch it every July 3rd." It's like this whole like thing that people do, and I'm like, it's going to be added obviously to my list of things to do when July 3rd rolls around, is to watch the Return of the Living Dead. So with that being said, we're going to jump in. If you've never heard of the Return of the Living Dead, if you're a younger generation listening to the show, hopefully this is one that I can turn you on to watching. So without further ado, we're going to start this week's episode, which is, what we do every week, which is starting with the synopsis. So the synopsis from IMDb goes as follows. When two bumbling employees at a medical supply warehouse accidentally release a deadly gas into the air, the vapors cause the dead to rise again as zombies. That synopsis says all it needs to say about what the first few sentences, the first few words, I mean, two bumbling employees. Only comedies use the word bumbling ahead of describing someone. There's never been like a dramatic movie or a serious movie that uses the word bumbling. So that alone should set the tone of the kind of movie that we're getting into. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be taken out of, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. And I want to stress that before we get into the reviews part, because you can already imagine the reviews that I was digging through on this movie. So anyway, the movie stars Clu Gallagher as Bert, James Karen as Frank, Don Calfa as Ernie, Tom Matthews as Freddie, Beverly Randolph as Tina, John Philippin as Chuck, Joel Shepard as Casey, Miguel Nunez as Spider, Brian Peck as Scuzz, Linnea Quigley as Trash, Mark Venturini as Suicide, and Jonathan Terry as Colonel Glover. Now, I'm be very honest. I only knew a couple people in this, and one was Bert. I believe was Bert Clu Gallagher. Now I'm kicking myself because I didn't write a little note next to it. But he was like the father of Jesse in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I was like, oh my god, that's the dad from Freddy too. And then also Tom Matthews, iconic Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th Part 6. Love him. And then of course Scream Queen herself, Linnea Quigley, who I personally knew and only knew besides this movie in Night of the Demons as Suzanne, iconic character in my opinion, and definitely I go back and forth because I get so like nervous, maybe like trying to reach out and getting her to come on to like an episode to do an interview because she just seems so fun too. But then I always back out. But anyway, those are the people that I personally knew, not personally, Jesus Christ, that I knew from other movies. So the Return of the Living Dead was released on August 16th, 1985. And here's a little fun fact. I was due on August 16th, 1986, 1 year later, but my birthday is August 15th, 1986, which is coming up. I'm going to be 37 soon. So, yay. Happy birthday to me. I don't remember what episode I have going up to that weekend of my birthday. I have to double check, but it'll be a fun one. And back to the show. The director of The Return of the Living Dead is Dan O'Bannon, produced by Tom Fox and Graham Henderson, written by Dan O'Bannon. It has a rating of R, a runtime of 1 hour and 31 minutes. The categorized genre is horror, comedy, and sci fi. The tagline is They're back from the grave and ready to party. And it has an IMDb rating of 7.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomato rating, tomato meter of 91% and an audience score of 79%. We're getting into these audience scores being lower than the other things, and it's just so strange to me. But anyway, I want to back up a little bit and talk about the tagline. So freaking fun. They're back from the grave and ready to party. I love a fucking good tagline for a movie. Uh, there's one coming up I have on here. I can't wait to do it, but it's going to be a fun one. I'm not going to spoil it now, but it's one of my favorite ones. I say it. It's going to be like my housewife tagline when I become one of the members of the Real Horror Housewives of whatever fucking town. I'm in New Jersey, but I'll go wherever you want me to go. Um, I love it. I love it. They're ready to party. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what they're talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, basically, it's like a bunch of misfit teens that are like punk rockers, except for like two members of the group, which I found so strange because the other two members that weren't like hardcore punk rock kind of teens were like preppy teens, and I was like, this is so strange. Like they don't mix. Was that done on purpose? Like I wasn't sure what was happening there, but it's they're ready to party. They're going. They're having a fucking. There's an iconic Linnea Quigley dance scene, of course, in the cemetery where she like strips all her clothes off naked and does this dance. And then like there's a line that she says that's like, "Do you ever fantasize about being murdered or something like that?" Just craziness, like over the top craziness. And yes, the zombies talk. I wouldn't put that out there as a spoiler. They talk. We'll get into that as we get into the reviews. But before that, comes that point in our show where it's time for this week's terrifying trivia question. So this week's terrifying trivia question is based on the movie, and it is this. It's such a minute detail. I don't know if anyone's going to know this. But the question is, what time zone are the main events set in? Again, the question is, what time zone are the main events of the movie set in? Stick around to the end of this episode to find out the answer. I thought it was a fun one because it stuck out to me, the whole time zone thing. I thought it was like, oh, that was like, for me, I don't know why. I'm a little dumb apparently because I'm talking and I'm like, I've never heard of it that way. But anyway, that's all the clues you're getting from me. And it is time to move on to the bulk of the show. It's time to do the top 3 best and worst reviews for Return of the Living Dead on IMDb. So doing the top 3 first, we are going to start off with the first review, which is titled, What Every Horror Comedy Wants to Be. There it is. Return of the Living Dead is an often hilarious, often frightening, often disgusting, and always entertaining horror comedy. The cast is great, the dialogue is snappy and very quotable, and the special effects still hold up very well nearly 20 years after the film's release. Fans of the horror genre, 1980s buffs, or just folks who enjoy something different occasionally will most likely get a kick out of it. 10 out of 10. I think it's well described, well descriptive of the movie. It's definitely hilarious. I guess there, you know what? There are times where it is frightening. Definitely times where it's disgusting, and it is always an entertaining horror comedy. I also agree that the special effects kind of hold up like enough. Like it's enough for like it's an 80s horror comedy. Like you want them to be kind of crappy special effects, but they're not too crappy. Like to be crappy. Sorry, Tubi. Anyway, I agree that fans of the horror genre and 1980s buffs or folks who enjoy occasional things like this would definitely get a kick out of it. Both my husband, who's not a big horror fan, and Jenny, who does like horror, both really enjoyed the movie. So there are 2 different types of audiences right there. Like I always kind of talk to both of them after we watch certain things because, like I said, Jenny does love horror. My husband does not love horror, but he'll do a lot of mainstream stuff. So when these obscure, like old kind of films come into my life again to be watched with him, it's interesting to see his take on it because I kind of like to see where, as like not a real horror fan person, views this and like what it is that like they don't understand about it. I like to kind of pick his brain, so he's kind of like it's kind of fun. Moving on to the next review, titled "Fuck You, Ballbuster." I think it's in the movie. It has to be, but anyway, review is okay. We have zombies, punk rockers, a punk rock soundtrack, violence, gore, nudity, one-liners, comedy, great special effects, gratuitous profanity, and an old creepy slash shady mortician, an old cool caddy, brains, cheesy acting where needed, dissected dogs, 3 sweet settings, and an awesome plot. Boom. What else do you need? This movie has been one of my favorites for the past 25 years. This is by far one of the most entertaining movies I have ever seen. Hilarious when it needs to be and sadistically chilling when the plot calls for it. That last sentence is extremely important when thinking about describing Return to the Living Dead. It's one of the reasons that I picked the review and not because of the title. I don't just pick reviews for the titles all the time. Sometimes, but not all the time. But no, seriously. Hilarious when it needs to be and sadistically chilling when the plot calls for it is, I think, very well balanced enough in the film. And also the punk rock soundtrack, like the fucking theme song has been stuck in my head since I've watched this movie over a month ago now. I forgot how great this soundtrack is. If you are a diehard horror fan into soundtracks and punk rock things like that, you have to love this. It's so catchy and so like instantly um recognizable for what it's from. So like if you played it in public, like everyone that's a fan of the movie is going to know exactly what that's from. Just a great soundtrack, and it does have everything for the 80s: the comedy, horror, the punk rock, the nudity, because every girl was fucking naked in the 80s almost, just about. I think it was and another thing to point out of this is cheesy acting where needed. It was supposed to have cheesy acting at parts. Like I like Tom Matthews, I think was a great like a way to describe, like he had cheesy stuff going on in there, but he also contrasting his, you know, Tommy Jarvis role, that was not cheesy at all. Like he, you know, you can see where that was like an intentional thing, and as opposed to some movies that are cheesy not on purpose, this was definitely not taking themselves too seriously. And that's all I have on this one. It's time to move on to the last best review for Return of the Living Dead, titled An Absolute Blast, my favorite zombie flick by far. This film is one of the few that I can and do watch over and over again, each time more fun than the last. The characters are awesome, the comedy is spot on, and then in quotations it says, "Hello, dispatch? Send more paramedics." And it's just nonstop action packed adventure. There are so many classic lines and scenes, I could spend an hour writing them out, but why ruin the surprise? Can't recommend this flick enough. I literally solely picked this review because one, it was a great review, but second, it did the fucking quote from the movie where the zombie, literally, spoiler alert, one of the zombies goes into like the ambulance and grabs like the walkie or whatever, and it's like, "Hello, dispatch, send more paramedics." It's so fucking dumb. I remember watching it as a kid with a friend of mine and cracking up. Like, is this shit for real? I did not know as a child what horror comedy movies were to appreciate it. I just was like, what the fuck is happening in this movie? Because I had seen the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead. So that movie terrified me. Still, like there's just parts of that come to my brain, and it just sends chills down my spine. So when I watched this, I was thinking of something like that, and I got this. So you can imagine my younger self being like, "Whoa, this is nothing like that." But I also like, because it had an impact of like being so outrageous to me, it stuck with me, and that's why I remember loving it. But yeah, that was one of the reasons I loved it. But those are the top 3 best reviews for Return of the Living Dead. Let's move on to the top 3 worst reviews of Return of the Living Dead on IMDb. First one's titled simply Pointless. Here we go. I cannot understand how anybody could like this movie. Really. From the moment you learn the zombies are invincible, all the suspense is killed. What is the point? It's not scary, and certainly not funny. Not even entertaining. And the ending is ridiculous. Well, a stupid ending to a stupid movie. You can't expect more. This is the perfect review to start off with somebody who has no fucking idea what the assignment was. They didn't know that it was a sort of parody to Night of the Living Dead. There wasn't it, what you're exactly right. It was pointless, but it was supposed to be pointless in a sense, in my opinion. Like I think that was part of what makes it great. Everything that you put out there is what made it great, and it is scary at parts, and it definitely is funny. But you couldn't appreciate that because you were so confused on what this movie was supposed to be. If you understood what the movie was supposed to be, I guarantee you would have a little bit of a different appreciation for it. But you went into this movie thinking it was a Night of the Living Dead, the way the younger Eric went into it thinking it was Night of the Living Dead. But the difference is you were just not into it at all. So some people just don't understand horror comedies, and I see it all the time. And as I do horror comedies in this show, I'm probably going to say it over and over and over again. Like, horror comedies are a real thing and an appreciated and a needed part in the horror genre. And there are just some people that just cannot understand. understand that, do not fathom that there are horror comedies that exist and are considered horror movies. They just you look at them and it's like their brains instantly forget. Like they refuse to fucking understand that. I don't get it. Like it's like talking to a fucking wall sometimes. They just look at you and I'm like, what do you mean? No, it's not. And they refuse to have a conversation. Jesus Christ, they're like Trump supporters. Moving on to the next worst review for Return of the Living Dead, titled The Stupidest Movie I've Ever Seen. It says warning spoilers. Okay. When I first watched Return of the Living Dead, I had already seen the sequels, and I wasn't really expecting a lot of this one. When I got done watching it, I realized I just lost an hour and a half of my life. Then I got mad. First of all, the actors sucked. I thought they were just stupid, no talented morons. Second, there was the fact it was a slap in the face to the zombie master George A. Romero. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead. Zombies are supposed to die when they get their head or brain destroyed, and this is they completely destroyed the zombie, cut his head off, caught him on fire, and he still came back. Then there was the fact that they could think and make decisions and talk. That was stupid. I said this to a friend once, and he said ignored the Romero classic because it had nothing to do with them. Then why is it called Return of the Living Dead? It's just a cheap spin-off to get some fast cash. As a horror movie wasn't scary as a horror movie wasn't scary at all, and as a comedy it wasn't funny at all. The only thing funny or scary about this movie is the idiot who would spend good money on it. Forget this. If you want to rent a zombie movie, rent a Romero movie or a Resident Evil. My voice went through puberty reading this goddamn review. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but I just want to talk about a few things first. Why? Why? I need to take a sip of my soda. Hold on. Okay. When you write a bad review, why are some people why do they always say we're going to start a new game right here right now? I'm probably not going to remember, but you listeners, I want you to fucking remember this. Whatever you're drinking, it's a new game. It doesn't have to be alcohol because I don't drink, but whatever it is, get a drink when you listen to this episode. Get a spooky shaker. Make it a virgin one if you're not an alcoholic. Every time a bad review says, I just lost an hour and so of my life, you have to drink. Because every bad review, like they're like so upset they lost a part of their movie. Okay, like it's a fucking movie. You act like they did something, they robbed you of something. Like you chose to do it. You didn't have to watch the whole movie if you were sitting there so upset about it. But let's start off with the first issue that I thought was weird with this review was that I had already seen the sequels and I wasn't really expecting a lot of this one. How did you watch sequels to a movie before you watched the original? Like the first one? Like, I don't know. Don't go out of order. It's weird. You're just weird. Um, Rude for calling the actors that they sucked. I think they did a really fucking good job. Loved it. And you insult them further. Like you didn't even just say that they sucked. You went on to say they were stupid, no talented morons. And I would love to know what you do for a living. Love to know that you're such a great critique, right? What do you do for a living, asshole? It was a slap in the face to Zombie Master George A. Romero. I want to be very clear. There's another part in here that says his friend says I ignored Romero Classic because it had nothing to do with them. You and your friend are fucking idiots because the creator of this helped create Night of the Living Dead with Romero and they split the rights. And I believe like Romero got like of the living dead, like something like that. And this guy got like dead, living dead. I forget. I read something about it, but like it was supposed to be a parody of Night of the Living Dead. It was supposed to go against the rules of Night of the Living Dead and make fun of it. That was the point that you and your friend missed. They didn't ignore that it had nothing to do with them. It didn't have anything to do with the movie, but in the movie, they referenced the movie Night of the Living Dead. It was like, oh, the movie lied? Like, that was one of the fucking jokes. Please, 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 people, stop putting shit out there you don't know about. Moving on to the final, last worst review for Return of the Living Dead. And guys, I'm going to say, I think this is a record for reviews. It's 2 sentences. It's titled, This would have been good if it wasn't so bad. Dot dot dot. And here we go. Well, didn't like it. I like my movies with a plot. Plot should be more interesting than seeing bodies coming after people saying, I want to eat your brains. That was the review. I mean, we have to give, appreciation where appreciation is due. And they're short, sweet, and to the point. Well, didn't like it. I like my movies with a plot. Here's the plot. Dumb guy opens military sealed drum, releases toxic gas that infects this town of fucking Louisville, Kentucky, and everyone becomes into invincible zombies to where the military has to step in and end it. There's a plot. There's stuff that happens in between. Not sure what you mean by that. But anyway, that concludes this week's top 3 best and worst reviews on IMDb for Return of the Living Dead. So let's get on to me, your host. What did I like the most from Return of the Living Dead? I like that the movie was a sort of spoof to Night of the Living Dead. It was over the top on purpose, yet it still managed to deliver all the right ingredients that a horror comedy should have. I honestly, like I just said this about the review. Like I really like that it was spoof of Night of the Living Dead. Like they had zombies talking. That when he shot him in the head, they didn't die. Like it was taking away the ingredients of Night of the Living Dead and saying that they don't apply here, taking rules that don't apply in this movie. And I thought it was fun, and I loved the acting of the men who were trying to stop everything. They were just so dramatic. Like it was like theater, like local theater dramatic. Like I think it was supposed to be like that, and I thought it was just. I laughed so much all the time, but I was extremely like disturbed by Tom Matthews' performance. Like he did scare me. He scared me. Spoiler. But anyway, what did I like the least about the movie? Again, I love the movie, but thinking, all right, what did I like the least? I guess what I didn't like the least was the way that it ended. For me, I would have liked a different kind of ending, just because, just because I just the ending was fine for the movie. It makes sense for the movie. It's not a bad ending, but I would have I would have wanted something more. But it's not really a read or a negative. I just had to pick something. But those are the two, what I liked most and what I liked least. And it is time to move on to answer this week's terrifying trivia question. So the question again was, what time zone are the main events of the movie set in? And the answer is Eastern Daylight Time in Louisville, Kentucky. Let me tell you why this bothered me. There's like Eastern Daylight Time and then Eastern Standard Time. I never pay attention to which is which. And so I always like, so when I read it, I'm like, Eastern Daylight Time. And me and Jenny are like, what? And Ryan's like, it's a thing. I'm like, fuck, I feel so stupid. I'm about to be 37. What the fuck? But anyway, let me know if you got that right. I just bothered me, but I was like, I'm just going to throw it out there and see if anyone knows it. So before we get into the final part of this, it's time to answer this question. So this is a fun question. It's time to reveal the number of deaths in Return of the Living Dead. The total I found online, I forgot to credit, so I apologize if you're out there, tag yourself, credit yourself. There's a total of 4,496 deaths. That's 4,052 humans, 429 zombies, 13 insects, and one animal. I think it's weird that only one animal was in there, but the numbers are obviously not 100%. But it sets a good reality for for the film, I guess. And if you haven't seen it, you're probably like 44, almost 4,500 kills. You have to watch the movie, and then it'll make a lot more sense to you. But I'm like, probably about right. So we've come to the point in the show now. Answered everything. We've read everyone's reviews, and it's time to do my final rating and review on Return of the Living Dead. So this week's rating system is going to be brains. And I give Return of the Living Dead an 8 out of 10 brains. I thought it was fun. I thought it was scary. It had all the right elements of a horror movie. I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 because it, certain parts like the ending and certain parts that didn't make sense on weird things that just didn't hit that 10 out of 10 mark for me. But an 8 out of 10 brains is my rating. And my final review is Return of the Living Dead is the definition of an 80s horror movie done right. It had metal, comedy, gore, ridiculous acting, and shoddy special effects, along with the stylish clothing and hair that were a staple of the 80s. After watching this again recently, it is apparent why this is considered a cult classic. So if you want to watch Return of the Living Dead, the Return of the Living Dead is streaming now on Tubi. That's the information that I found online. You may also Google Return of the Living Dead streaming places and find it somewhere else, or go and purchase it and add it to your collection. But that concludes this week's episode. Next week, we're going to jump into another cult classic movie, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, sticking with the cult classic 80s horror comedy. But that's it for this week. Have a really good week. Don't forget to rate and review this episode. And stay spooky, everybody. Bye. Thanks again for joining me on another episode of The Horror Within Me. Please rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening in from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to get notified when new episodes drop. I'm also on all major social channels, so be sure to check out my website, www.thehorrorwithinme.com, for all those links. And until next time, my friends, stay spooky.